The lecture hall was enormous, with seats rising up in curved rows that could hold almost 1,000 students. Katie Morrison sat near the back, trying to make herself small in her chair. Next to her, Ben Clark was doing the same thing. They were the only two humans in the entire room, surrounded by hundreds of alien students from dozens of different worlds. Professor Velthor stood at the front of the hall, his tall, thin body covered in blue scales that shimmered under the lights. He was a Zentarii, one of the oldest and most respected species in the galaxy. His 4 eyes scanned the room as he spoke, his voice amplified to reach every corner of the massive space. "Today we conclude our study of extinct apex predators," the professor said, touching a control pad on his desk. A holographic image appeared above him, showing a massive creature with razor-sharp wings. The razor wings of Keltos Prime hunted in packs. They could tear through metal with their claws. They dominated their world for 10 million years before a meteor strike ended their reign. Katie watched the hologram shift, showing different creatures. Each one looked more terrifying than the last. There were shadow creatures that could phase through solid matter, serpents the size of buildings that lived in asteroid fields, and pack hunters with acid for blood. The professor explained how each species had been the ultimate predator on their world, and how each had eventually gone extinct. "But there is one species," the professor continued, his voice dropping lower, "that stands above all others in our records. A species so deadly, so perfectly adapted to violence, that we are fortunate they vanished before reaching the stars." The hologram changed again. This time it showed a planet, beautiful and blue-green, with white clouds swirling across its surface. Katie felt her stomach tighten. She recognized that planet immediately. "This world was surveyed 200 years ago," Professor Velthor explained. "Our scientists classified it as a Class 12 death world, the highest danger rating we have. The planet experienced extreme temperature variations, violent weather patterns, and was home to thousands of apex predators. Most remarkable was the dominant species that evolved there." The hologram zoomed in, showing images that looked like they were taken from very far away. Katie could see what looked like old cities, structures that seemed familiar but abandoned and overgrown. "The species that lived here had no natural defenses," the professor said. "No claws, no armor, no venom. Yet they became the dominant predator on one of the most hostile planets we have ever documented. They hunted animals 10 times their size. They survived in deserts, in frozen wastelands, in dense jungles. They even learned to process toxins for recreation." Several students in the front rows made sounds of disgust or disbelief. A Morphean student raised one of her tentacles. "Professor, how is that possible? Without natural weapons?" "They made their own weapons," Professor Velthor replied. "They learned to use tools, to hunt in groups, to plan and strategize. But more than that, they had something unique. They could run for hours without stopping, chasing their prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. They could heal from injuries that would kill most species. They could adapt to almost any environment. They were, in every sense, the perfect predator." Katie's heart was pounding now. She glanced at Ben, who was staring straight ahead, his jaw tight. "The survey teams found evidence of this species everywhere on the planet," the professor continued. "They had spread to every continent, every climate zone. They had even begun to leave their planet, reaching their moon with primitive rockets. But when the survey teams returned 50 years later to establish first contact, they found nothing. The species was gone. The cities were empty. We assume they destroyed themselves through warfare, which was common in their culture. We call them the Ancients of Sol 3. The hologram rotated, showing different angles of the blue-green planet. Katie knew every ocean, every continent. She had grown up there. She had learned to swim in those oceans, had hiked in those mountains. Her hand slowly raised into the air. Professor Velthor paused, his 4 eyes focusing on her. Yes? You have a question? Katie stood up, her voice shaking slightly. That planet isn't abandoned, Professor. It has over 10 billion people living on it right now. The lecture hall went completely silent. 1,000 alien faces turned to look at her. I'm sorry, Professor Velthor said, tilting his head in confusion. The planet you're showing, Katie said, her voice getting stronger. It's called Earth. That's where I'm from. That's my home world. The professor's scales flickered from blue to a pale gray, a sign of shock in his species. That's impossible. The ancients went extinct 200 years ago. The planet was surveyed multiple times. Ben stood up beside Katie. She's right, Professor. I'm from Earth, too. Humans never went extinct. We've been there the whole time. We just didn't have space travel yet when those surveys were done. Katie pulled out her student tablet and sent her registration file to the main display. It appeared next to the hologram of Earth, showing clearly Katie Morrison, origin planet, Earth, Sol system, species, human. The professor stared at the display, his scales continuing to flicker between colors. He pulled up more files, cross-referencing data, his movements becoming faster and more jerky. But the surveys, he muttered. The report said, they said the species was gone. We were probably hiding, Katie said. 200 years ago, we were in the middle of a big war. A lot of people lived underground during that time. Your survey drones probably missed us. A Atarian student named Zix, who sat a few rows ahead, turned around to stare at them. His large eyes were wide with shock. You're saying you're the species that survived that death world? You're the ancients? Katie nodded slowly. I guess so, but we just call ourselves humans. All around the lecture hall, students were pulling away from them, creating empty spaces in the rows of seats. Whispers filled the air, growing louder. The professor held up one hand for silence, but it took several tries before the room quieted down. Class dismissed, Professor Velthor finally said, his voice hoarse. I need to contact the Academy administration immediately. As students rushed for the exits, Katie and Ben stood frozen in place, watching 1,000 aliens flee from them in fear. Katie and Ben sat in a waiting room outside the dean's office, watching alien students walk past and stare at them through the glass walls. Some looked curious, but most looked scared. A group of Morphean students actually crossed to the other side of the hallway to avoid getting too close. This is bad, Ben said quietly. We just became the scary monsters of the campus. Before Katie could respond, the door opened. A human woman in a formal uniform stepped out. She looked tired and worried. This was Director Lisa Hammond, the human liaison officer at the Academy. Come in, both of you, Director Hammond said. We have a lot to discuss. Inside the office, Professor Velthor was there, along with 2 other aliens. One was Dr. Yenix, a small gray creature with large eyes who specialized in studying different species. The other was Commander Thalos, a large reptilian being who handled security for the station. Sit down, please, Director Hammond said, gesturing to 2 chairs. We need to understand what happened in that lecture hall. Katie explained everything, from the professor's lecture about extinct predators to the moment she revealed her homeworld. Director Hammond listened carefully, her expression growing more troubled with each sentence. This is exactly what we were afraid of, the director said when Katie finished. When humanity first made contact with the galactic community 50 years ago, we made a decision. We decided not to tell everyone how dangerous Earth actually was. Why not? Ben asked. Because we didn't want to scare potential friends and allies, Director Hammond explained. Earth is classified as a Class 12 death world, which is the highest danger rating in galactic records. Most species evolve on garden worlds with mild weather and few predators. when they learned humans came from a planet with lions, bears, sharks, hurricanes, earthquakes, and diseases that could wipe out millions, we worried they would never trust us. Professor Velthor spoke up, his scales now a deep purple color that showed embarrassment. The historical records show that Earth was surveyed 200 years ago during what humans call World War III. Is that correct? Director Hammond nodded. Yes. At that time, much of humanity was living in underground bunkers. Our cities were damaged or abandoned. The survey drones probably looked at Earth and assumed we had destroyed ourselves. But you survived, Dr. Yennick said, her voice high and squeaky. She was looking at a tablet, scrolling through information rapidly. According to these records, humans not only survived that war, but rebuilt your entire civilization in just 50 years. That level of recovery is unprecedented. Humans are good at surviving, Katie said quietly. Dr. Yennick looked up at her with those large eyes. I have been researching your species for the past 3 hours. Do you know what I found? Your evolutionary history is terrifying. She touched her tablet, and a holographic display appeared in the center of the room. It showed a timeline of human evolution, with images and data points. Humans evolved as persistence hunters, Dr. Yennick explained. You can run for hours without stopping, something almost no other predator can do. You would chase animals until they collapsed from exhaustion, then kill them while they were helpless. Your species has more stamina than almost any other predator we have documented. Commander Thalos leaned forward, his yellow eyes focused on the display. What else? Humans can survive on minimal food and water for extended periods, Dr. Yennick continued. You can heal from injuries that would be fatal to most species. You can adapt to extreme temperatures. Your immune system can fight off diseases that would kill entire populations of other species. And perhaps most remarkable, you consume substances that are poisonous to other species as recreational drugs. What do you mean? Professor Velthor asked. Dr. Yennick pulled up another image. Capsaicin, the chemical that makes plants spicy. For most species, this is a toxin that causes severe pain. Humans eat it for enjoyment. Theobromine, found in chocolate, is lethal to many species. Humans consume it daily. Ethanol is a poison that damages organs. Humans drink it socially. Caffeine is a neurotoxin. Humans use it to wake up in the morning. The room was silent for a long moment. Katie looked at Ben, who shrugged helplessly. We never really thought about it that way, Katie said. Those things are just normal for us. That is precisely the problem, Commander Thalos said, his deep voice rumbling. To you, these abilities are normal. To the rest of the galaxy, they are the abilities of the most dangerous predator species we have ever encountered. Director Hammond stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the station beyond. The news is already spreading. Within hours, every species in the galactic community will know that humans are the ancients from Earth. There will be fear, possibly panic. Some governments may call for humans to be restricted or monitored. But we're not dangerous, Ben protested. Humans have been part of the galactic community for 50 years. We've never attacked anyone. We've been peaceful. Have you? Dr. Yennick asked softly. I have also been reading your history. In the past 5,000 years, humans have fought over 10,000 wars. You have developed weapons capable of destroying your entire planet multiple times over. Even now, Earth maintains a military force larger than most species would ever consider necessary. That's our past, Katie said, feeling defensive. We've changed. We learned from our mistakes. Perhaps, Commander Thalos said. But the question everyone will be asking is this. If humans are capable of such violence, if you come from a world that shaped you into perfect predators, what is stopping you from becoming a threat to the rest of us? Katie felt anger rising in her chest. Because we choose not to be. Every day humans choose peace over violence. We choose cooperation over conquest. Just because we can be dangerous doesn't mean we are dangerous. Professor Velthor's scales had shifted to a soft green color, which Katie had learned meant he was thinking deeply. The student raises a valid point. Capability is not the same as intent. Many species have the ability to cause harm, but they choose not to. The problem is perception, Director Hammond said, turning back to face them. The galactic community now sees humans differently. We are no longer the friendly newcomers who joined the galaxy 50 years ago. We are the survivors of a death world, the species that should have gone extinct but didn't. That changes everything. The meeting continued for another hour, but no clear solution emerged. When Katie and Ben finally left the office, they walked through hallways that seemed emptier than before. Other students moved away from them, keeping distance. 3 days had passed since the lecture hall incident, and the entire galactic community was talking about nothing else. Katie watched the news feeds on her tablet while sitting in her dorm room. Every major news network was running stories about humans and Earth. Some were factual, but many were sensationalized and full of fear. Human students revealed as Death World survivors, one headline read. Are humans the galaxy's next threat? Asked another. There were even some that called for humans to be sent back to Earth and banned from space travel. A knock on her door made Katie look up. It was Ben, and behind him stood Zix, the Atarian student from their xenobiology class. Zix looked nervous, his large eyes darting around as if he expected something to jump out at him. Hey, Ben said. The Galactic Council wants to meet with us. They're asking for a demonstration of human abilities. A demonstration? Katie asked. Like what? A circus show? More like a presentation, Zix said, his voice quiet. They want to understand what humans can actually do. Director Hammond thinks it might help calm fears if people see humans are not monsters. Katie wasn't sure about that, but she agreed to go. An hour later, she stood in a large gymnasium with Ben and Director Hammond. The room was filled with representatives from dozens of different species, including members of the Galactic Council. There were also military officers, scientists, and journalists with recording equipment. Professor Velthor stood at the front, looking uncomfortable. His scales were a neutral gray color. Thank you all for coming. Today we will observe normal human capabilities. Director Hammond has assured us that nothing dangerous will be demonstrated. Director Hammond stepped forward. Everything you see today is completely normal for humans. These are not special abilities or enhancements. This is simply what humans can do naturally. The first demonstration was endurance running. Katie stepped onto a large treadmill that had been brought in for the occasion. The alien observers watched as she began to run at a steady pace. Most species can sprint for short distances, Director Hammond explained as Katie ran. But humans evolved as endurance hunters. Katie will now run for 1 hour at a moderate pace to demonstrate this ability. The observers seemed skeptical at first. But as 10 minutes passed, then 20, then 30, their expressions changed. Katie kept running, her breathing steady and controlled. She wasn't even sweating much yet. A Kryn officer in the audience stood up. This is not possible. No predator can maintain this level of activity. She must be enhanced somehow. She's not, Director Hammond said calmly. In fact, on Earth, many humans run for 2 or 3 hours as a form of exercise. Some humans run for over 24 hours in competitions called ultramarathons. The Kryn officer sat down slowly, his face showing shock. Around the room, other observers were whispering to each other, some in amazement, some in fear. After an hour, Katie stepped off the treadmill. She was breathing hard and covered in sweat, but she was fine. She smiled and waved at the crowd, which seemed to make some of them more uncomfortable. Next was Ben's turn. He approached a climbing wall that had been set up along one side of the gymnasium. It was tall, reaching almost to the ceiling, with small handholds scattered across its surface. Humans have exceptional grip strength and spatial awareness, Director Hammond explained as Ben began to climb. This allowed our ancestors to climb trees to escape predators and find food. Ben moved up the wall smoothly, his fingers and toes finding holds that looked impossibly small. He reached the top, touched a marker, and then climbed back down. The whole thing took less than 5 minutes. On Earth, humans climb mountains that are over 8,000 meters tall, Director Hammond added. Some do it without oxygen assistance, in temperatures that would freeze most species solid. For the third demonstration, Director Hammond brought out a tray of food. There was chocolate, coffee, hot peppers, and several other items that looked normal to Katie, but caused gasps from the audience. These substances are toxic to most galactic species, Director Hammond explained. Theobromine in chocolate can cause death in many species. Capsaicin in peppers causes extreme pain. Caffeine is a neurotoxin, but humans consume these regularly. Katie ate a piece of chocolate, drank some coffee, and then bit into a hot pepper. The pepper was spicy, making her eyes water a bit, but she chewed and swallowed it without problem. Several aliens in the audience looked away as if they couldn't bear to watch. "Now I will demonstrate human healing," Director Hammond said. She took out a small, sterile needle and pricked Katie's finger. A drop of blood appeared. The observers watched in silence as the bleeding stopped within seconds, the blood clotting naturally. Director Hammond explained how human blood had multiple clotting factors that worked together to seal wounds quickly, and how the human immune system would prevent infection. "In a few days, this tiny wound will be completely healed with no scar," she said. "Humans can recover from injuries that would be fatal to most species. Broken bones heal themselves, damaged organs can regenerate, even the human liver can regrow if partially removed." The final part of the demonstration was a history lesson. Director Hammond showed images and videos from Earth's past, explaining how humans had survived ice ages, adapted to live on every continent, and even domesticated some of their planet's predators. Humans took wolves, which were dangerous pack hunters, and bred them over thousands of years into dogs, which are now companions and helpers, she explained, showing pictures of various dog breeds. "We did the same with cats, horses, and many other species." A small alien in the front row raised a tentacle. "You domesticated your predators? Why?" "Because it was useful," Director Hammond said simply. "And because humans have always been good at forming bonds with other species, even ones that could hurt us." The question and answer session that followed was intense. Species after species asked about human capabilities, human history, and human intentions. A Morphean representative named Krila stood up, her tentacles waving agitatedly. "This demonstration proves humans are dangerous. You survive conditions that would kill us. You heal from injuries we could not. You eat poisons for pleasure. How can we trust you?" Katie felt frustrated by the question, but Director Hammond placed a calming hand on her shoulder and stepped forward to answer. "Because in all of human history, despite our capabilities, we have chosen to reach for the stars in peace. When we discovered faster-than-light travel 50 years ago, we could have used it to conquer. Instead, we asked to join the galactic community as learners and friends. We have kept that promise for 5 decades. But Katie could see that many in the audience were not convinced. Fear was stronger than logic. 2 weeks had passed since the demonstration, and things had gotten worse instead of better. Katie walked through the academy hallways with her head down, trying to ignore the stares and whispers. Several classes had been canceled because alien students refused to attend if humans were present. Krila had started a petition to have all humans removed from the academy, and over 2,000 students had signed it. Ben met her at the cafeteria carrying a tray of food. They sat at a table in the corner away from everyone else. The nearest occupied table was at least 10 meters away. "My parents called this morning," Ben said quietly. "They're worried. There are protests on some worlds calling for humans to be banned from space travel. Some governments are talking about cutting diplomatic ties with Earth." Katie pushed her food around on her plate. "Maybe we should just go home. We're making things worse by being here." No, a voice said behind them. They turned to see Zix standing there, holding his own tray. May I sit with you? Katie nodded, surprised. Zix sat down, looking nervous but determined. I have been thinking a lot about what Professor Velthor said in that lecture, about how humans are the deadliest species from the deadliest planet. But I have also been watching you both for 2 weeks. And? Ben asked. And you are not monsters, Zix said firmly. You study hard. You help other students with their work. Katie held the door open for me yesterday, even though I had been avoiding her. You choose kindness even when others fear you. That means something. Before Katie could respond, an alarm began blaring throughout the academy. Red lights flashed along the ceiling. Everyone in the cafeteria looked up in confusion. Director Hammond's voice came over the communication system, sounding urgent. All students return to your quarters immediately. This is not a drill. All staff report to the command center. Katie, Ben, and Zix rushed to their dorm building along with hundreds of other students. The hallways were full of confused and frightened aliens asking each other what was happening. It took almost an hour before they got any information. The news feeds finally updated with the story. A research vessel had become stranded on a planet called Valdris 9. The ship had crashed during a survey mission, and the crew of 12 aliens from various species were trapped on the surface. The planet was rated as a Class 11 death world, just 1 level below Earth. Katie read the details on her tablet, her stomach sinking. Valdris 9 had high gravity, extreme temperature swings between day and night, violent storms, and an atmosphere that was toxic to most species. The native wildlife included several apex predators. Rescue teams from 3 different species had attempted to land, but were forced to turn back. The conditions were too hostile. They're all going to die, Zix said, reading over Katie's shoulder. No rescue team can survive those conditions long enough to reach them. Ben looked at Katie. But humans could. Katie nodded slowly. Earth had prepared humans for exactly these kinds of conditions. High gravity would be difficult, but manageable. Temperature extremes were something humans dealt with regularly. Toxic atmospheres could be handled with breathing equipment. And dangerous predators were something human ancestors had faced for millions of years. We need to talk to Director Hammond, Katie said, standing up. 20 minutes later, they were in the command center with Director Hammond, Commander Thalos, and several Galactic Council members. The main screen showed Valdris 9, a planet with dark red continents and gray oceans. The stranded crew has food and water for 5 more days, Commander Thalos was saying. But we cannot get anyone to them. Every rescue attempt has failed. What about humans? Katie asked, stepping forward. Everyone in the room turned to look at her. Humans could survive on that planet. We could rescue them. A council member, a tall being made of what looked like living crystal, shook his head. We cannot ask humans to risk their lives. The conditions on Valdris 9 are extremely dangerous. You're not asking, Ben said, moving to stand beside Katie. We're volunteering. Director Hammond looked at them both for a long moment. You understand this could be fatal. Valdris 9 is nearly as dangerous as Earth. The wildlife there has already killed 2 members of the previous rescue team. We understand, Katie said, but those people will die if no one helps them. We can't just let that happen. For several minutes, the command center was filled with heated discussion. Some council members argued it was too dangerous. Others pointed out that the stranded crew would definitely die without help. Finally, Commander Thalos raised one large hand for silence. If the humans are willing to volunteer, we should accept their help, but they should not go alone. We will send our best equipment and support team. Within 2 hours, a rescue mission was organized. Katie and Ben were joined by 6 other human volunteers from the Academy's staff. Director Hammond would lead the team. They were given environment suits, medical supplies, weapons for defense against wildlife, and a transport ship capable of landing on Valdris 9. As they prepared to leave, hundreds of students gathered in the docking bay to watch. Professor Velthor was there, his scales shifting through several colors at once. He approached Katie before she boarded the ship. "Student Morrison," he said formally, "I want you to know that I was wrong about your species. I believed the ancients of Earth were extinct because I could not imagine any species surviving such a world. But you did more than survive. You thrived. And now you risk your life to save others who feared you. That is not the action of a monster." Katie felt tears in her eyes, but blinked them away. "Thank you, Professor." The ship launched, accelerating away from the Academy station. Through the viewports, Katie could see the stars streaking past as they entered faster-than-light travel. The journey to Valdris 9 would take 6 hours. During the flight, Director Hammond gathered the team for a briefing. She showed them maps of the crash site, explained the dangers they would face, and outlined the rescue plan. It was straightforward but risky. They would land near the crashed ship, make their way on foot through hostile terrain, extract the stranded crew, and get back to their ship before the planet's deadly night cycle began. "The gravity is 30% higher than Earth normal," Director Hammond said. "The temperature is currently 45 degrees Celsius and will drop to -60 after sunset in 8 hours. The local predators are active hunters, some as large as elephants. There are also reports of poisonous plants that release spores when disturbed." One of the other human volunteers, a man named Greg, laughed. "So basically like camping in Australia." Despite the tension, several team members smiled. Katie felt her own nervousness fade slightly. They were humans. This is what humans did. They survived impossible odds. They adapted to deadly environments, and they helped others, even when those others feared them. The ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel, and Valdris 9 appeared on the view screen. It looked harsh and unwelcoming, with dark clouds swirling across its surface. But Katie felt ready. They all did. The landing was rough. The transport ship shook violently as it descended through Valdris 9's atmosphere, fighting against strong winds and turbulence. Katie gripped her seat harness tightly, feeling her stomach lurch with each drop. Finally, with a heavy thud, they touched down about 2 kilometers from the crashed research vessel. Director Hammond opened the rear hatch, and immediately the heat hit them like a physical wall. Even through their environment suits, Katie could feel the temperature. The air shimmered above the dark red soil, and the sky was a strange orange color. "Gravity's definitely stronger," Ben said, taking his first steps down the ramp. His movements were slower, more careful. Everyone felt the extra 30% pulling at their muscles and bones. The landscape looked alien and hostile. Dark red rocks jutted up from the ground like broken teeth. Strange plants with thick, waxy leaves grew in clusters, some of them taller than the humans. In the distance, Katie could see what looked like mountains, their peaks hidden in orange clouds. "Stay in formation," Director Hammond ordered. "Watch for wildlife. According to the scans, there are at least 3 large predators within a kilometer of our position." The team moved out, carrying equipment and weapons. The gravity made every step harder than it should be, and the heat was exhausting even with the environment suits regulating their body temperature. After 30 minutes of walking, Katie's legs were burning with effort. "How much farther?" Greg asked, breathing hard. 1.3 kilometers, another team member named Sarah replied, checking her scanner. "The crashed ship is just beyond that ridge." A sound made them all freeze. It was a deep, rumbling growl that seemed to vibrate through the ground. From behind a cluster of rocks, a creature emerged. It was massive, at least 4 meters tall, with 6 legs and a wide mouth full of serrated teeth. Its skin was covered in thick, dark scales. "Nobody move," Director Hammond said quietly. "Sudden movements might trigger an attack." The creature circled them slowly, its small eyes studying the strange beings that had invaded its territory. Katie felt her heart pounding but kept herself still. She had learned about predator behavior in her studies. Many predators tested potential prey before attacking, looking for signs of weakness or fear. The creature moved closer, and Katie could smell its breath, hot and rank. It opened its mouth, showing rows of teeth designed to tear flesh. Then Ben did something that surprised everyone. He stepped forward and shouted at the creature, making himself as large and intimidating as possible. The creature stopped, confused. This tiny thing was challenging it? Ben shouted again, and the other humans joined in, making loud noises and waving their arms. It was an old human strategy, making yourself seem bigger and more dangerous than you were. The creature took a step back, then another. It was used to prey that ran away in fear, not prey that stood its ground and fought back. After a tense minute, it turned and lumbered away, disappearing behind the rocks. "That was incredibly stupid and incredibly brave," Director Hammond said to Ben. "Good work." They continued toward the crash site, moving as quickly as the high gravity would allow. The ridge was steep, and climbing it in the heavy gravity took all their strength. But humans were built for this kind of challenge. Their muscles adapted, their bodies compensated, and they pushed through the exhaustion. At the top of the ridge, they could finally see the crashed research vessel. It had plowed a long trench through the soil when it came down, and one of its wings was completely torn off. Smoke still rose from the damaged engines. "There's movement," Sarah said, pointing at the ship. "Life signs inside. All 12 crew members are still alive." The rescue team hurried down the ridge toward the ship. The entrance hatch was jammed shut, bent from the impact. Greg and another human named Marcus worked together, using their combined strength to pry it open. Metal groaned and shrieked, but slowly the hatch gave way. Inside, the stranded crew was huddled in the main compartment. They were a mix of species, all looking exhausted and scared. When they saw the humans entering through the hatch, several of them pressed themselves against the far wall. "It's okay," Katie said gently, removing her helmet so they could see her face. "We're here to rescue you." A Morphean crew member, her tentacles wrapped tightly around herself, spoke in a shaking voice. "You came for us? After everything our people said about you?" "Of course we came," Ben said, also removing his helmet. "You needed help. That's all that matters." The rescue team moved quickly, checking each crew member for injuries and preparing them for transport. 2 of the aliens had broken bones, and 1 was suffering from exposure to the toxic atmosphere. The humans administered first aid and distributed breathing masks. "We need to move fast," Director Hammond said, checking her scanner. "The sun sets in 90 minutes and the temperature will drop rapidly. We won't survive the night cycle outside." Getting the injured crew members back to the transport ship was the hardest part. The humans had to carry them, fighting against the high gravity every step of the way. Katie supported a small Zentarii engineer who couldn't walk on her injured leg. The extra weight made the gravity feel even more oppressive, and Katie's muscles screamed with effort. Halfway back, they encountered another predator. This one was different from the first, longer and lower to the ground, with 8 legs and a tail covered in spikes. It blocked their path, hissing at them. This time, Director Hammond didn't try to scare it off. She raised her weapon and fired a warning shot into the ground near the creature. The loud noise and the spray of dirt startled it, and it scuttled away into the rocks. "Keep moving," Director Hammond ordered. "The sun is getting lower." The trek back to the transport ship was exhausting and painful. Every human on the team was operating on pure determination by the time they reached the ship. They loaded the rescued crew members first, making sure everyone was secure. Katie was the last one up the ramp. She turned to look back at Valdris 9 one final time. The orange sky was darkening, and the temperature was already dropping. In the distance, she could hear the calls of nocturnal predators beginning to wake up. This planet was deadly, but no deadlier than Earth had once been. The transport ship lifted off just as the sun disappeared below the horizon. Through the viewports, Katie watched the temperature reading drop rapidly, going from 45 degrees to 0 in just minutes. Any rescue team still on the surface would have frozen to death. The journey back to the academy took 6 hours. The rescued crew members were treated by medical staff on the ship, and slowly they began to relax. The Morphean engineer that Katie had helped came to sit beside her. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I was certain we would die on that planet. I never thought humans would come to save us, especially after how my species treated you." Katie smiled. Earth taught humans a lot of things. It taught us to survive, to adapt, to overcome challenges. But it also taught us that helping others is more important than holding grudges. When the ship docked at the academy, the entire station seemed to be waiting. Thousands of students and staff crowded the docking bay. As the rescued crew members emerged, healthy and safe, a cheer went up from the crowd. Professor Velthor was at the front of the crowd. His scales were bright blue, the color of joy and relief. When Katie and Ben stepped off the ship, he approached them. "Students Morrison and Clark," he said formally, "I owe you both an apology. I owe your entire species an apology. I stood in that lecture hall and called your ancestors the deadliest species in the galaxy. I was wrong." "You weren't wrong," Katie said. "Earth did make us capable of violence. It did shape us into survivors. But you chose what to do with that capability," Professor Velthor continued. "You chose to use your strength to protect the weak. You chose to risk your lives to save people who feared you. That is not the mark of a deadly species. That is the mark of a noble one." In the days that followed, everything changed. The petition to remove humans from the academy was withdrawn. Kreela publicly apologized for her fear-mongering. News networks that had called humans dangerous now ran stories about the brave rescue on Valdris 9. Professor Velthor gave a new lecture, this time with Katie and Ben as guest speakers. The lecture hall was just as full as before, but this time the alien students leaned forward with interest instead of pulling back in fear. "I made a mistake in my previous lecture," Professor Velthor told the crowd. "I said the deadliest species had vanished. The truth is more complex. The species from Earth did not vanish. They evolved. They learned. They chose to reach for the stars not as conquerors, but as friends." Katie stood up to address the class. "Earth made humans strong. It gave us the ability to survive in conditions that would kill most species. But we decided what to do with that strength. We could have used it to dominate. Instead, we chose to help. That choice matters more than where we came from." As the semester continued, Katie noticed changes everywhere. Alien students no longer avoided her in the hallways. Some even asked to study with her and Ben. Zix became a close friend, often joining them for meals and helping them understand the complex social dynamics of the various alien species. One evening, Katie stood at the observation deck, looking out at the stars. Ben joined her, and they stood in comfortable silence for a while. "Do you think Earth will always define us?" Ben asked. "Will we always be the survivors from the death world?" Katie thought about it. "Maybe, but that's okay. Earth is part of who we are. It shaped us, challenged us, made us strong, but it doesn't control us. We choose our own path." She looked out at the vast expanse of space, at the millions of stars that represented billions of worlds and countless species. Humanity had joined this galactic community as the newcomers, the survivors from a deadly planet. But they had proven they belonged here, not because they were the deadliest species, but because they chose to be the kindest.